Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've been
Wow,
you've been promoted very quickly.
I really
Terrific.
have. That's astounding.
First of all, we've all expressed our deep respect for your service to our country, but also let me thank you for your endurance. We appreciate it. And I wanted to ask you about a speech that you made in 2007. It was at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and it was a speech entitled "The United States and Iran at Dangerous Crossroads." And in that speech, you, in referring to Iran, you said that the strategy of containment remains relevant today. And so I wanted to ask you about that statement that you made in 2007 about the strategy of containment remains relevant with regard to Iran today. Now, that was in 2007. But why would you say that, first of all, and then isn't that inconsistent with what you've been saying today with regard to containment?
Well, I don't have the speech in front of me, and I think there was more to it than just that few words that you quoted. If I recall, the entire speech was about how do we deal with Iran. If I recall, what I was inventorying, in specific reference to containment, was within that inventory, what are the options? I don't think that speech says that I support it.
No, but you said that it was relevant to the discussion with Iran, and I guess I would ask you to say, why do you think that that was a strategy that we should have considered? It was obviously one of the things you mentioned.
Well, I didn't say it was a strategy. I don't think, as I said, in the context of how do we deal with it.
I don't want to be unfair, but I think just to be clear, the quote that you said was the strategy of containment remains relevant. So why is it relevant with regard to Iran?
The bigger point is what I was saying. I haven't looked at that speech since I gave it, probably, but I do recall some of it. And the point was, what is the range of options that we would have to look at, the world would look at? Again, I didn't advocate it. I didn't recommend it. I didn't support it.
Was it that containment was one of the options?
Yes. Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, when you look at the whole range of what your options are, that certainly would be one of them.
Do you think containment's one of the options now?
No, I don't now, but that doesn't make any difference what I think. And it's when you look at ranges, it's like the global zero. That was not a recommendation report. That was a range of goals, aspirations, possibilities. That wasn't in any way, that report never said, we recommend the following. And if I recall that speech, I think that was the same kind of what's the range of
and Senator, I want to be clear, it does matter what you think, and obviously your understanding and thought process on these issues is very important to us. So as a follow-up, I know that Senator Vitter had asked you about a portion of the book that you wrote, America, Our Next Chapter, and it was in that book you had said that the genie of nuclear armaments is already out of the bottle no matter what Iran does, obviously North Korea, other powers. In this imperfect world, sovereign nation states possessing nuclear weapons capability as opposed to stateless terrorist groups will often respond with some degree of responsible or at least sane behavior. Do you believe that Iran responds or will respond with some degree of responsible or sane behavior?
Well, first of all, it's not what I suggested in that quote, as you know.
Well, it's in the context of Iran, but I'm asking you just straightforwardly, do you think that the Iranian regime responds? You talked about the difference between nation states versus, for example, stateless terrorist organizations. Do you believe, in the context of Iran, do you believe that the Iranian regime responds with some degree of responsible or at least sane behavior, or will respond like that?
Well, so far they have not. And I have said, as you know, and I've said in that same book that you're quoting from, that Iran is a state sponsor of terrorism. Mm-hmm. I've said that many times. So no is the answer to your question.
So if they're not responding, I mean, they haven't been responding with a level of, with a degree of responsible or sane behavior, and as you say in your book, that it's a state sponsor of terrorism, I'm also struggling with the question of why you would have thought that it was appropriate for us to have direct, unconditional talks with Iran, because here we have a regime that doesn't respond in a responsible or sane behavior as a state sponsor of terrorism, and what we thought we could, why that would be an appropriate manner for us to address them.
Well, first, I said engagement, and I think we should talk. We actually are indirectly in the P5+1. We have been. I think that's responsible. I think it's always responsible to try to talk first. North Korea. I don't think that I don't consider North Korea a responsible, sane administration, but we're talking to North Korea. We've been talking bilaterally to North Korea. We're talking with the Party of Six to North Korea. I think that's wise. I think it's always wise to try to talk to people before you get into war.
But I think that you were not just, you were beyond the P5, you were for direct discussions with our two countries and also for establishing diplomatic ties with our country.
Well, again, when I talked about possibility of diplomatic ties, or even I said, I think in 2002, encouraging Iran to join the WTO. I've always thought that that's smarter and wiser if you can help push institutions like China into world bodies. Because when they go into world bodies, they have to comply with some semblance of international behavior. Doesn't mean they always will. They won't. They cheat. But I think we're smarter to do that. I've never, Senator, I've never thought engagement is weakness. I never thought it was surrender. I never thought it was appeasement. I think it's clearly in our interest. If that doesn't work, then I think the President's position and his strategy have been exactly right. Get the United Nations behind you, get the international sanctions behind you, keep military options on the table. If the military option is the only option, it's the only option.
Just to be clear, I don't think that all engagement is weakness either, but I think there's a huge distinction when we're dealing with a regime that is the largest state sponsor of terrorism. And given the fact that they have a long history, including in Iraq, with assisting the militias to murder our troops, including what they've done with Hezbollah and Hamas, what they're doing now in Syria. So I think there's always a distinction in how we deal with different players around the world, is my point. And I know that my time has expired, and I will submit for the record questions that I think are very important about the Virginia-class submarine. I share the important work done at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard with my colleagues, Senator Jeanne Shaheen, and also I know Senator King is very focused on that and maintaining our submarine fleet. I know that Senator Blumenthal asked you about that as well, and I do have concerns that part of the Global Zero report does recommend that the Ohio-class submarine would actually be diminished down to 10. So I'll follow up with those questions in the record and
be glad to
go now. Thank you.
Glad to respond. Thank you.